I'm a huge fan of horror games. That's no secret. I also really like these so-called walking simulators that are all the rage these days. Some don't like that term, but it's not like it's wrong. Fine. First-person experience games. Is that better? Whatever you want to call them, putting horror, psychological or otherwise, into the mix is a surefire way to get me to be interested in your game. The park certainly does both. If you didn't know, and I didn't, the park is a spin-off of the MMO from Funcom called The Secret World. Now, you don't need to have played or know anything about that game to be able to enjoy this. If you do, you'll get a bit more out of it, but otherwise you can play this without issue. Kind of. I'll explain it a bit later. The story of the park sees the player take control of Lorraine, mother of Callum, in Atlantic Island Park, a place that has special meaning to them. At the outset, the pair are about to be on their way home. It's the end of the day and the park is closed, but Callum loses his teddy bear somewhere inside the amusement park and runs in to find him. Your job is to run in and find your son, a task that's not going to be easy. A task that's going to be much harder and much more sinister than Lorraine expected. You see, Lorraine is a mother with a certain shaky past. Psychologically, she isn't the greatest. Throughout the search for her boy, you see and hear the reasons for this, and it puts much of her attitude into perspective. She's struggling with life, with family, and with everything. The tale is set over 30 years ago, and in a park which has a dark past, stemming from before it was even built. Once it's up and running, the wickedness continues. When we gain control, it's still light out, but the sun is setting fast. As we get into the park proper, you're betrayed by that star, and the darkness breeds Lorraine's inability to cope with her surroundings. Add in the fact that her son is missing, and her night just got a whole hell of a lot worse. Because the game is a major story and plot-heavy experience, I'm not going to get too much further into it than what this is. I don't want to spoil any more than needs to be. The gist is, Lorraine is mentally messed up, and the park is messed up too. Throw in a missing son, and you have yourself a narrative. Moving on to the gameplay, one interesting thing that one would hope is a feature in a game like this would be to ride on some of the attractions in the amusement park. I can confirm we definitely get to do that here. In fact, I would highly recommend riding as many as you can, especially if you want to get the full breadth of the story. You may not like what you find out, but you'll be better equipped to understand how everything unfolds later. Same goes for exploring and reading every note or interacting with every item the game allows. The more you see, the more you know, and if you're a fan of pressing a button to shout for your son, Jason? This game gives you that, but it's not a bad thing like some other games. Sean? It works really well here, and even has a gameplay relevance to not only get audible cues, but also gives you a visual one too. Graphically, the game isn't going to melt your eyes, but honestly, it doesn't look half bad either. I really like the way the atmosphere and mood was set with how everything looked and felt. If Funcom was going for spooky, they really nailed it. Another place they nailed is in the voice acting. Lorraine and the small supporting cast do a wonderful job expressing themselves in a clear and powerful way to keep you on your toes. And musically, it's not too shabby either. I don't think I'll be scouring the internet looking for a soundtrack CD, mostly because I doubt one exists, but what we get here held the tone well. And while on the subject of sound, I want to branch off to talk about the status effects our heroine suffers through. The panic and assumed paranoia Lorraine exhibits regularly throughout the night is done really well, visually and with the acting. It also doesn't hurt that the great Xbox One controller's rumble triggers are on full display here. It puts attention not only on screen, but in your hands. It was a really nice feature. Another nice feature is one that I know a lot of people moan about in first-person shooter games, and that's being able to see the player's feet or not. Well, I can confirm here that you not only see your feet, but the rest of your body too. And it may or may not be in the game for a specific reason. Again, make sure to explore and ride some rides, huh? So with those good areas in the park, there are unfortunately some bad ones too. Firstly, you get a lot of the overall backstory for the characters and history of the park throughout notes and things you pick up to read. Great, I have no issues with that, but what I do take issue with is most of the notes you find, they're really tough to read. The font is either too small or too stylized to be able to see well. I was able to struggle through and make things out, but my girlfriend couldn't read a single thing, even with her contacts in. I would have loved the chance to have a zoom in and zoom out feature. Next time, if you guys make another one, please add that. Moving on to the atmosphere, which I said I was a fan of, there were a lot of missed opportunities in my opinion. There are a few good jump scares littered throughout the park, but honestly, there was so much left on the table that I was backseat developing the whole time. I mean, you could have used the same tactics you already employ in the game a lot more, but sadly they apparently weren't meant to be. Now don't get me wrong, the scares the game has got me every single time, but there were so many areas to improve on this, or add in a scare, or put a creepy scene in that go unused, it was borderline hurting me mentally. I'm exaggerating a bit, but hopefully you get my point. This is the most egregious in the horror genre staple of the amusement park's haunted house. So many missed opportunities there. You'll see what I mean should you venture inside it. And the toughest critique I think I have in me is with the story. Sometimes I knew where the story was going, but sometimes I felt completely lost because it was almost like some of the beats of information were walking all over each other. I'd be following along, secure in my thoughts, and then suddenly it gets confusing. And since the game is really short, only about an hour or two long, even if you explore the entire park, much of the confusion gets dumped on you in the final act. I'd love the developers to expand on the story and explain it a bit clearer somewhere, or somehow, because I am very intrigued by what we get. It's just that by the end, it's so muddled that it ends up feeling uneven. The story seems to lead you in one direction, then sends you in another, even with collecting every bit of info you can. Just when you're starting to grasp the situation, the wheels seem to fall off and the game ends. It's a shame because I really got into the backstory of the park and Lorraine. Though, it's possible that certain characters and artwork likely gets a better understanding if you know and or play the Secret World MMO game. I got the sense that the park owner is a much bigger presence in that world than what the game gives us. The same goes with his motivations and the boogeyman you may already know from the game's artwork. It's not a huge gripe, but I did feel lost on occasion when it came to those characters. Not completely or even hugely, but enough in some way to feel bummed. And I have a friend who actually plays and loves the Secret World MMO, and he confirmed what I said. The park owner and even Lorraine and her son's fate are vastly tied, apparently, into that game. So, yeah, you can enjoy this on your own, but if you know more about it, you'll get a lot more out of it. One final point I want to bring up is the achievements. The full 1,000 and 100% of the trophies on PS4, they can be achieved in a single playthrough if you're vigilant enough. However, 4 or 5 of those didn't unlock until my second playthrough. Now I know what you may be thinking, I didn't do what was needed. Well, unfortunately you'd be wrong because almost every single one I missed is one you can't miss if you beat the game. So, hopefully this doesn't happen to anyone else, but were it to happen to you, at least you won't lose days of your life trying to complete it a second time. At the end of the day, the park has some really nice set pieces going for it. The mood it's looking for mostly achieves, and the voice work really hits the nail right on the head. The way the game moves isn't a chore like so many other first-person experience games tend to be. It does some things right, just not all of them. But all that said, even with the negatives, I did enjoy myself, including the second time through, even though the game doesn't necessarily warrant one, and I was only doing it just to see if the achievements were bugged completely. I would love to see a follow-up to this game by these guys. I mean, it doesn't have to be tied to this series, it would be nice, but something in this vein, and hopefully longer. I know that this was a project bred from a specific want from the studio, and then determined to be worthy of a full product, so I imagine getting to do something else with the knowledge gained would be much more impressive, because the groundwork to another future success has already been laid here. If your expectations are in order, taking a trip to Atlantic Island Park may not be such a scary proposition after all.
Callum? 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 Where'd you go?
Over here.
Callum.